Last week, we hosted at our house a little Christmas tea for our neighbors. We've done this for the past several years. It's a really fun way for us to just get to know the people who live on our block. And so in preparation for the Christmas tea, companies coming over, we had to go through the ritual. You know what I'm talking about. The ritual where we basically hide the reality of our home. Because you know what I'm talking about, right? When people are coming into your space, you don't want them to see your home as it really is. You don't want them to see, like in our case, books strewn around the living room. You don't want your company getting Cheerios stuck to their socks as they walk around your house. You don't want them tripping over the yoga mat in the living room. You don't want them to see, get a smell of like the milk that's been left out on the counter all morning. Of course not. Because when people walk into our home, we want them to experience our home like it's supposed to be, right? So the cushions are gently fluffed in the corner, and the shoes are all lined up one next to the other. The floors are clean, and the drying rack is put away. It's not even on the counter. It's got to be gone. That's right. We got to hide the drying rack. Every other day of our lives, the drying rack lives next to our sink, and we usually think we're doing a pretty good job if the dishes are clean or if they're put away. Like, whoa, we're really killing it. But it's like, no. Company's coming over, the drying rack doesn't even exist. It's got to hide. It's got to go away. And this is the truth of what happens when company comes into our space. We don't just clean up. We hide as much as we can. It's like, get everything off the counters, all the bills and all the papers. It doesn't matter. Put them in a cupboard some way with the pots. Who cares? The kettle. No kettle. Get it out of here. The kettle exists. We usually have one junk drawer, right? Like for everyday stuff goes in, but when company's coming over, every drawer, every cupboard, every closet is eligible to store all kinds of random stuff. Because we don't want people to experience the reality of our home. We want them to experience our home the way it's supposed to be. Maybe the way we wish it really was. And I think we all crave those moments where life is the way it's supposed to be. For life to be the way that we maybe imagine it in our minds. We're in our fourth week of Advent. And if you've been tracking with us, we've been wrestling with some big questions, some tough questions that tend to rise to the surface in this season. Questions like, do I have enough? Do I have enough of God? Have I done enough? And I think beneath it all, there's a core question that maybe haunts some of us. And that question is, am I enough? Because each of us knows the reality of what's really true in our lives. And we work really hard at offering a curated version of ourselves, but we all know that we're like scrambling to keep things tucked away in the cupboards and the drawers, keeping things out of sight, hidden in the dark, because we're afraid of what others might think if they knew the real us. If others knew how I really talk to my kids, or if others knew what showed up in my browsing history, or if others knew the kind of selfishness and anger that I'm capable of. And the dark areas of our lives that we try to keep hidden, they're more than our mistakes. They're more than our missteps. Oftentimes, there's pain and brokenness in our lives that we just try to keep hidden from others because we don't want to appear weak. We don't want to appear wounded. We don't want to come across as incapable of figuring life out on our own. And so we don't always want others to know about the abuses that we've suffered. We don't want others to know about some of our health struggles. We don't want others to always know about the feelings of doubt and fear and anxiety that haunts us. We want others to believe that we're good, we're enough, even if we know that's not reality. And so we try to keep things in the dark. But the message of Advent is a message of light breaking in of light shining in dark places. This is from the opening of John's Gospel. It says, "In the beginning, the Word already existed. The Word was with God, and the Word was God. He existed in the beginning with God. God created everything through him, and nothing was created except through him. The Word gave life to everything that was created, and his life brought light to everyone. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness can never extinguish it. The one who is the true light, who gives light to everyone, was coming into the world." See, these opening words from John's Gospel, they remind us that the coming of Christ that we celebrate at Christmas is anchored in the story of creation. He echoes the opening words of Genesis on purpose because he wants us to understand that the one who is coming is the one who was there in the beginning. And in the same way that light entered into the chaos and darkness in the beginning in creation, so too the light of Christ is breaking into darkness again. Jesus came to bring light into the world, light into our lives, light into our darkness. This is the good news of Advent. The one who brought light into the cosmos has come to bring light into our lives, to shine in darkness with the hope that darkness cannot extinguish it. This is the powerful message of Christmas, that the deepest dark is not the place where grace goes to die, but the deepest dark is the place where grace goes to be reborn. Christ came to shine in the darkness, to extend grace to us in our darkness, to transform the dark into light. So we don't need to spend all of our energy hiding the mess, keeping it contained and out of sight. We need to open ourselves up to the light of Jesus, and when we do, we will find grace upon grace upon grace. So a question for you and I to consider. Are you hiding reality from God? Are you trying to keep things tucked away in the junk drawer, out of sight, keeping it hidden, keeping it buried, pretending it's not there? Trying so hard to project the right kind of life, but in the process actually denying ourselves access for the light to break into our lives. So will you open yourself up to God's light? Will you let him in, trusting that his light, it brings grace and healing? So maybe this Advent season, we need to open ourselves up to the truth that not all is right within us. And maybe we need to stop trying to project the right kind of life and be honest with ourselves. Be honest with God. And I think be honest with others around us. Because one of the primary ways that we experience the healing power of God's presence is in the midst of a loving community. This is from Ephesians. It says, "For you were darkness, you were once darkness, but now you are light in the Lord. Live as children of light, for the fruit of the light consists in all goodness, righteousness, and truth. And find out what pleases the Lord. Have nothing to do with the fruitless deeds of darkness, but rather expose them. It is shameful even to mention what the disobedient do in secret. But everything exposed by the light becomes visible, and everything that is illuminated becomes a light. That's why it is said, 'Wake up, sleeper, rise from the dead, and Christ will shine on you.'" You see, Paul is calling us to live in the reality of the light. The light has come to show us true life. Live into it. No longer shall we linger in the secret of darkness. He's calling us to come out from hiding. Unfortunately, many Christians have taken this passage as like a license to go after people, to make it our mission, to like point a finger of judgment at the ways we see others going wrong. But this is not the way that Christ brings light into the world. He wants to draw us out of the shadows into the goodness of his ways. The word expose, it sounds a little invasive, doesn't it? No one wants to be exposed. But if we actually pay attention to what Paul is saying in this passage, we realize he's saying that when the light shines, things are exposed, things are revealed. We're able to see things for how they truly are. It allows us to see life as it really is. And it says that everything that we see in the light, it becomes illuminated. It lights up and it actually becomes a light. When we invite the light to shine in our lives, we are changed. We are transformed. We can discover hope and actually step out of the darkness and into the ways of light, into a life of goodness, righteousness, and truth. Paul is telling us it's not good to stay hidden in the shadows. And we do this together, not in a way of pointing fingers and slamming one another, but rather opening ourselves up to receive the light. To say, I'm not going to hide anymore. I'm not going to keep things tucked away in the drawers. I'm going to invite the light of Jesus to shine in the dark places of my life before my friends. Because this is the power of what happens when we open ourselves up to the light of Christ in community. Our lives actually reflect the light to others. We become a source of light to each other. And when I think of this, I think of the moon. Because, the moon has no light in itself, right? It has no source of energy on its own. And yet, it reflects the light of the sun, and in doing so, it actually becomes a source of light itself. And this is what happens when we open ourselves up to the light of Christ with others. As we experience the grace of God's light, we become a source of light ourselves. And I've experienced this. I've lived in this. I know the power of what it means to be a light and to see the light shining in other people's lives as they open themselves up in vulnerability and honesty. In the past, I've sat with a group of men, and we created space to gather together and to be honest, to just simply name what was real in our lives and to invite the light to shine into us. Opening up with one another about our struggles with anger, struggles with money, struggles with sexual sin. And these are often the things that we try to keep buried and are hidden way up in the attic. It's no one can know this is happening. No one can know this is real in my life. But what we discovered is as we opened ourselves up and invited the light of Jesus to just shine in those areas, we actually became a light to each other. We became a source of hope as we could see in each other that darkness was being changed, that it was becoming light. There was hope for us that we could experience that same healing in our lives as well. We have a word for this in Christian circles. It's a word that's become a bit loaded over time. It's the word confession. And if your anxiety level just jumped up a notch, I think that's pretty normal. We often get this image of confession that comes with a sense of what did you do, right? Tell me about all the awful things you've done so that I can shake my head and make you feel like a failure. But that is not at all the image of confession that we get from the Bible. This is what it says in James. It says, confess your sins to each other and pray for each other so that you may be healed. The earnest prayer of a righteous person has great power and produces wonderful results. James is just simply calling us to be honest with one another. to face into the reality together. Don't hide the darkness. Don't deny it. Don't defend it. Name the realities of darkness in your life so you may be healed, so you experience God's grace, so that you can pray for one another, for God to restore you. Open yourself up to the light of Christ, that you too may become a light to one another, offering each other hope that Christ's light can shine in dark places. Hope that the darkness will not extinguish the light. And if you've never experienced this kind of safety in community, I feel like you're missing out on something really beautiful, something really good that I believe God wants everyone in his family to experience. In our current home church, we are experiencing this regularly, creating space to open ourselves up before each other, to allow the light to shine in our lives. And we are finding that we are experiencing healing together. And it's not always easy, but we're finding that confession is not about beating ourselves up, but it's about a pathway to healing amidst the realities of life. So are you facing into the realities of life in community? Are you experiencing the healing powers of confession? Are you becoming a light to others by allowing the light of Christ to shine in your life before others? Do you have people in your life that you can be honest with, that you can face into the realities of life together, receiving grace and forgiveness together? And if not, what step might you be able to take in that direction? Because maybe this feels like overwhelming and daunting, and you feel like, I don't think that I could step into that right now. And I recognize that it takes trust, it takes safety, it takes time, but I also think it takes a little intentionality. I don't think this kind of safety happens by accident. I think we need to move towards this kind of community together. So are there ways that you could take a step in that direction? Maybe you do have people around you. You just need to create some space to gather together and be real with one another. Or maybe you feel like there's no one around you that you can be real with. Maybe you feel like there's nowhere to turn. This might feel like a big step, but perhaps for you, your step might be joining a home church in the new year. You maybe look around this room and feel like you see strangers and unfamiliar faces. Well, I guarantee you it is possible to change that. The people that we gather with on Wednesday nights in my home, for the most part, 2 years ago, we were complete strangers from each other. And what we have discovered is that over time, we've created a place for safety and honesty where we can be real and we can experience the healing power of God's work together. Maybe your next step is small. Maybe you just need to start with the small, everyday things of life. Maybe your next step is to simply try to apologize even just a little bit more. To just actually not sort of carry on and slide past those sort of missteps or mistakes, but actually take the time to acknowledge with your family or with those around you, hey, I'm sorry. That wasn't right. Will you forgive me? And to realize that those little steps into the light are actually not as scary as they maybe feel. Or maybe you just need to start opening up with others around you about what you're walking through, what you're experiencing. Allowing others to maybe hear a little bit of what you're feeling, to be aware, to be able to say, hey, this is what's going on with my health. It's not all good, and I'm just going to let you know. Or to maybe let people know that there's a tough season that you're living through. Maybe you're having a bad day. Maybe you're having a bad week. Maybe you're having a bad year. And maybe you could just find small ways to just open those things up as a way of opening yourself up to receive the light of Jesus. Maybe we can just simply start by naming the small stuff that's not quite right. But as we sort out what it means for us to take a step in this direction, what it means to open ourselves up more fully to God's light, we also need to remember that while we continue to walk amidst darkness, we also look forward to the day when the sun will return and darkness will be ultimately done away with. Did you know that it's actually no accident that we celebrate Christmas amidst the darkest season of the year? You see, back in the early centuries when Christianity was starting to extend throughout Asia Minor and into northern Africa and throughout Europe, the Christians, they started to bump up against other religions that had all these great celebrations around the winter solstice. And in particular, when the Christians encountered the Celts in northern Europe, they discovered that the Celts had these elaborate, great celebrations at the winter solstice. And the reason is because as a people group, as a culture, they desperately needed the sun to return. They needed those long days of summer to come back for their survival. And so they had these great celebrations and worship amidst the bleakness of winter as a way to actually summon the sun to return. And so the Christians, as they encountered this, they're like, oh, yes, we know the same story. In fact, we want to tell you the rest of the story because you see, the light has actually come. The light has come into the world. Light has broken into darkness. The light has come to offer us hope amidst the darkness. And the light has promised that one day he will return. One day he will put an end to all darkness. And so we celebrate Christmas. We celebrate the coming of Christ in this bleak, dark season to remind us that we live between the two comings of Christ. The light has come. The light has come to bring us hope, to tell us that darkness does not have power over us. We can experience the healing power of the light even now. But we also sit in darkness and we wait. We wait for the ultimate end of darkness. We wait for the day when these words will be fully realized. Look, God's home is now among his people. He will live with them and they will be his people. God himself will be with them. He will wipe every tear from their eyes and there will be no more death or sorrow or crying or pain. All these things are gone forever. And the one sitting on the throne said, look, I am making everything new. See, one day, the darkness will be gone, and all will be set right. So we continue to wait, trusting that even in our present darkness, we are wrapped up in a greater truth. We are covered by the love and light of Jesus. And one day, all chaos and hatred and selfishness and anger will all be done away with. In this dark season, we remember that the sun will return. And so we wait for the ultimate restoration of all things. And in the meantime, we do not fear the darkness. We don't need to hide our weaknesses, our brokenness, our pain. We're okay. We are enough because right now, Christ is enough. And he invites us, just as we are, to receive his light and experience his love and walk in new life as a taste of the life that is to come. I'm going to close this morning with an Advent prayer from Karl Rahner. Slowly, a light is beginning to dawn. I've begun to understand something I've known for a long time. You are still in the process of your coming. Your appearance in the form of a slave was only the beginning of your coming. Still, you will come again, because the fact that you have already come must continue to be revealed ever more clearly. O God, who is to come, grant me the grace to live now in the hour of your advent in such a way that I may merit to live in you forever in the blissful hour of your eternity.